Hello, my name is Pierre Whalen. I'm Bishop in charge of the Convocation of Episcopal Churches in Europe, and I'm here to tell you about Transformed by Stories, which is a program for Christian education and leadership formation that we've developed here in Europe. Our situation is very unusual for the Episcopal Church. We work in 6 countries, and as a result, we have people who speak various languages, have different cultures, and to try to learn and understand together. You can understand perhaps the challenges are great here. So in the summer of 2006, I gathered with the newly named European Institute of Christian Studies, which is the education department of the Convocation, and we started to try to find a way to develop something that could be used across the Convocation in all 6 of our countries to help people develop parochial and convocation-wide programs around different topics. And as a result, we began to think about the various styles of narratives that people have been using all across the world, and we realized that what everybody has in common is telling stories. So it starts there. Each of us is part of someone else's story, but most particularly, becoming and living out the Christian faith is about becoming part of Jesus' story. In the Bible, we have the Acts of the Apostles, which are stories about what the first disciples of Jesus did as they began to spread across the Roman Empire, in a way, as Jesus said, to the ends of the earth. So this is already part of our tradition, but the fact of the matter is that if we are ourselves disciples of Jesus, we are part of his story. We are part of his people. Creating the Transformed by Stories method started with an experiment in 3 different conferences that took place over 2 years. Each conference lasted about a day and a half, and they were based on, again, the idea of my story, my life story, and the story of God's people, the story of Jesus. So the first one was entitled, Listening to God's Story as My Story. The first idea that I am part of God's story, that this is what the message of salvation is all about, and that I need to appropriate this for myself. And then we built on that to create a second conference that we called Learning to Tell God's Story as My Story, so that we begin to be able to reflect on our own lives in terms of the scriptural message, the stories that we find in the Bible. And finally, the third conference, what it's like to live in the Christian community that is the church, to be able to help people understand the Holy Eucharist, the Holy Baptism, and the life of a worshiping Christian, and how that is lived out by going out into the world, now knowing whose story we are part of, and what story is the story of my life. As we experienced each of these conferences that were now coalescing into the TBS method, we learned some things that we had not expected. The first is, if we're going to be able to hear our own story as God's story, it means also listening to other people's stories. Part of the TBS method is learning to become an active listener to other people, as well as an active listener to what God is saying in God's Word, the Bible. What we also learned is that not only did we have a very powerful method for Christian education, but this also could serve for leadership development. Transformed by Stories is a method that can be adapted to all kinds of subjects. In 2008, we had a diocesan convention. Some people would call it a diocesan synod. And we were very blessed to be able to have with us throughout the entire convention the Most Reverend Catherine Jefferts Schori, presiding bishop and primate of the Episcopal Church. So we took a risk to use our brand new method. It was a convention designed around the Transformed by Stories method. And what you will see on this compact disc is the stories of that 2008 convention and how things coalesced so that as each delegate was able to relate his or her story of the stories of their lives, of their churches, and of themselves in those churches, a greater story began to emerge. And this is the transformational power that we've experienced in using the TBS method in various ways. People leave with the sense that they've learned to tell it for themselves as another new story of what I learned about me and the church and God, how I can now articulate my faith, my hope to other people, even starting with the man or the woman in the mirror. So, as I said, we're very excited about what this can offer you and your church or your diocese as another way to be able to get across not only ideas, but without lectures, without sitting there and taking notes, the teachings, the processes, methods that you want them to learn, and to do it in a way that not only transforms the learners, but transforms the teachers. So on this CD, you will find individual stories and then the blending together of these stories so that you can have a model of how TBS can work for you as it has begun to work for us.